Can you hear me?
Yes. All right.
Okay.
So this is Fam Electric Ghost, and we have Dance Loud, electronic duo from Chicago on the line.
Howdy.
How you doing?
Hi.
So,
all right, got some headphones. I think we're good to go. Let's see.
okay. So you guys met in 2008 in art school in Chicago?
Yep. Through a mutual friend, technically, we ended up having a class directly outside from each other. So our classes were neighbors.
Okay, that's cool. So you, both of you have like degrees in music. Kristin, you have a degree in audio engineering?
Yeah. So I took recording arts, same thing, sound design and production, whatever you want to call it. And there wasn't really minors you couldn't really take a minor, but I kind of part minored in music and music business. So then Desereé did music business primarily, and then took some fun audio courses.
That's cool. Yeah, so typically, like what I do is I go through the questions I sent you, but you're interesting with your background is like your combination DJ and electronic, like analog. So it's like, digital and analog together along with DJ and live drumming, which is really, really cool because, I'm a big proponent of analog synths. My whole sound is kind of rooted in that.
Yeah, yeah.
And progressive rock bands, like you mentioned, like Tool and Pink Floyd and Radiohead and Deadmau5. Yeah, I mean, my inspirations were like, Keith Emerson, Pete Townsend, Yes, Parliament Funkadelic, Sun Ra. That's kind of where I'm coming from. So you're kind of in the same space with the progressive rock that name checks that you have here.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty cool. And I've seen that you've got your a sub 37.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, that was like a Labor Day sale, and I mean that was part of the reason.
Yeah, we went in a rabbit hole of looking up like analog synthesizers, and when we first started doing music production, we were using a lot of soft synths, and
there was a missing sub tone that we needed. I think we're both fans of the mid-low tones.
Yeah, well, Moogs tend to give you everything you want.
Oh yeah, it's like a motorcycle.
It is. We were demoing so many of them at the stores, and it just didn't. It was just extremely clear that you can feel it, and then we're trying to make sure every frequency goes through your chest.
Yeah.
The soft synths were great though, but for the high mids.
The one thing about the synths is like the Moogs, there was a point where people stopped using them because I read a story that recording engineers, like when you get to the 80s, by the 90s, you had a lot of engineers were saying that the progressive rock coming from the Moogs and like the R25 600s and the Prophets was too heavy in the mix. And so like the DX7, Yamaha DX7 and the Roland D50s, like the FM and linear synths were not didn't kind of slam through the mix as heavy. And so there was like a decision for a lot of producers to stop using the analog synths.
I mean, maybe it's also with the guitars becoming so popular too at the time.
Yeah, it was this idea that there's a certain sound that comes from these Moogs or Prophets or any of these analog synths that now you hear coming back.
And I believe, you're right, exactly with that last sentence, because I think Moog screwed up on their voltage and accidentally that's that quote unquote fat sound.
Yeah.
I think there is something with it because because when you look at the frequency, I mean, it's like across the board from like 20 to 20 almost. And it's interesting to think about, when they started to take it out, the same reason that, Terry Date that recorded Pantera and Slayer and Deftones were using 58s for the vocals instead of condenser microphones, just to be able to pinpoint certain frequencies and it not be across the board.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like it's interesting because I have my Moogs are all semi-modular. I've got like the grandmother, and the Mother 32 and the DFAM because they kind of go back to the beginning of Moog with their
Mm-hmm.
old big modules, and I kind of like the CP3 mixer is just something that if you ever experienced, it just has a lot of gain. It just creates crazy amount of distortion and kind of feedback. But yeah, it's just cool to see a band using the modes, because I see so many people using soft synths, and it's cool and it's affordable.
Mm-hmm.
But there's something about these analog synths, that's why the ARP 2600 came back. It came back this year at NAMM, and that thing was used to create R2D2. It was used on Alien and Apocalypse Now, and Johnny Winter used it on Frankenstein. I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff that these analog synths are kind of like famous for.
Mm-hmm.
And even Pete Townsend used an ARP on Who Are You, and the song Who Are You. He actually ran his guitar through the envelope follower.
Oh, yeah.
That's how you get that sound.
Processor. Plug it right in. It's got all the pedals you ever need.
I think Motley Crue started to do the same, where they're running guitars through synthesizers, and that's where the drummer started to get into synthesizers and production work.
Doesn't Tom York run his vocals through that? One of the modes?
Yeah. Radiohead's famous, and Wilco are famous for running all kinds of instruments and vocals through ARPs and through Moog, ladder filters and Prophet 5, state variable filters and stuff. But I get too technical, but
yeah, I really loved reading and watching about Bob Moog, because he just seemed like such a humble guy that was like, I'm an electrical engineer, and he felt that the universe had sent him, these things for him to give to musicians. And he said, he was like, this isn't my idea. This idea was given to me. And I found that to be really beautiful.
Yeah, I watched the biography on the net, and I've got a bunch of Moogs, and they've got these statements in the manuals where he basically says it's kind of like the universe is talking to him through these machines, and that's why Moogs have the character of a guitar, of a Gibson, or of a Strat, because they're hand built and models. You ever had like a Model D, a 72 Model D versus a 74? They sound different.
I think it makes a difference too. It's employee owned. Once you got happy workers, you got some good products. It's like a chef owned restaurant.
Yeah.
It goes across the board for people that use it. I mean, I think Dr. Dre had a Model D. It was
he took the Parliament Funkadelic sound that Bernie Worrell was doing with his Model D, and then he had some producers and keyboardists kind of bring that sound to him. Besides just sampling Parliament Funkadelic, some people thought he just sampled it. Like on the Chronic, they actually play live lines. It's not just sampled. They're actually using the Model D and playing original lines. But a lot of people thought he just lifted it, but they didn't. Some of them are, but a lot of them are actually created.
There should be famous presets named after these songs now.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's interesting. So you're from Chicago.
I am. Kristin and Desereé's from outside of St. Louis.
The town near where Miles Davis is from.
Oh, awesome.
So I had like a really strong rock, jazz, blues upbringing.
And my upbringing, didn't know what that was. Only Michael Jackson and Motown exists. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's cool. You got a hybrid kind of mix and soul and then rock. And then you've got the modern DJ with like live drumming and the analog sense. That's like kind of, to me, it's like cross genre is kind of where it's at. And I've been a big proponent of mixing like progressive rock with a punk aesthetic, and then jazz like overtones, like bringing Sun Ra. Sun Ra is one of my favorite jazz outfits. But it's just interesting to see what you guys are doing. And you had a pretty cool experiences live. You played in at the Knitting Factory in Tammany Hall, in Oz, in New Orleans, and the Bonnaroo Artist Lounge, and a bunch of Chicago venues and stuff, and some LGBT festivals. So you guys have been playing for a while.
Right. The Knitting Factory was the first and reason why we went and got a tour bus. That's why we had only 28 days to build a Ford E450,
like a shuttle bus you would see at like a hospital or an airport.
That was when we had our first booking agent. So with the agent involved, it just gave us the drive Literally.
Yeah. Because when I was like 18 years old, I did our first kind of tour with a kind of like an indie rock band that was kind of Radiohead-ish. We went down to New Orleans, and I just remember sitting in a car for 15 hours upright and just so uncomfortable. So when we were kind of doing the trek to New York, I was like, well, I want to be able to lie down, and be able to relax. Like, I felt like I was exhausted the whole trip because, there wasn't much time to sleep. And, when you're driving, that should be the time that you should be able to sleep. So we, threw some bunk beds in the back, and it was prior to van life. It was like 2012.
All we had was schooly.net.
Yeah. And there was, these people from the South that, were kind of creating these buses, kind of like van down by the river style. And, so we had not much to go off of what to build on, but I knew I wanted to have like a little kind of restroom area and somewhere we can cook and just stay in RV parks. So when we played in Tammany Hall, we stayed outside of Central Park. And then when we played Knitting Factory, we just slept in our bus right outside of Knitting Factory.
There's free parking in New York, I'm telling you.
Yeah. So we'd find it and sleep in it, because RV parks are never in cities. You have back-to-back shows in the same city. You just find somewhere to sleep.
So you can make it to these
sometimes
shows.
The Walmart's
where there's a will, there's a way.
Sometimes Walmart's will let you have RVs in a parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was looking into some RV options, but I haven't really toured that heavy. And I'm kind of a one-man show, so I got tour. Now I've got road cases, but I'm kind of I got enough that'll fit like a U-Haul.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a Dodge Caravan and a trailer would be pretty cheap.
Yeah, I was looking at different options when I have to go further. But you're right on with that. That's like the traditional. You read stories about the Who in their, in the late, in 66 and 65, they had, these kind of really kind of low budget tour buses.
Yeah. I read something not too long ago that said where RVs and tour buses came from, that there was Christian rock bands, I think in the 40s and 50s, and they were going, I don't know, from church to church or what. And so they started to create buses around these tours, for musicians. So, all the RVers can thank musicians for, even the development of RV parks and stuff that go around it. And it all came around touring.
Yeah, because when the Beatles happened, you had so many Beatle clones, bands had to start touring. And so you had the whole industry started building up to provide, what we see today, as the tour bus.
Mm-hmm.
So that's cool. So let me get into the questions, because we kind of going around them. But so when did you first get into music? At what age? Each of you can kind of get into.
Okay, Des, you first, since you're the older one with that.
Yeah, my parents were big music fans. They liked rock and heavy metal. And so when I was in kindergarten, I thought AC/DC was the coolest band, and Angus Young being a guitar player, I loved it. So I begged my mom for 2 years for a guitar. So when I turned 7, that Christmas was the best Christmas. I had gotten a guitar. And then I went through lessons just for a short amount of time and learned Smoke on the Water. Wasn't really fond of my teacher, and I stopped playing for a little bit. And then when I hit 5th grade, I started playing drums in school. And then in 6th grade, picked up the guitar again, and then just started playing in bands kind of all throughout middle school and most of high school. And then when I was in high school, I was kind of like a rebel, hellion child. And so when I got into college, I started playing for a concert band at the community college I was going to. And then I just knew I wanted to continue, and I kept playing with bands. And then I came to Columbia here in Chicago. That's, it was an art school that had a music concentration that wasn't just performance, that I could, it actually had a music business program. And I thought, it's not, as practical to go to school for art. So I thought, well, if it's business, I mean, this is pretty versatile. I could use it with anything. So that's what kind of drove me, with that. And then when I came to Chicago and I met Kristin, that's where she opened the world of house music,
performance.
I loved metal because I liked high tempo. And then she showed me another genre of music that has high tempo. So then.
So it's interesting. Because electronic dance music and trance and a lot of the other EBM, they all have that kind of
Yeah, she just
that power.
basically wasn't allowed to control the music in the Jeep. So with me, I started as a late bloomer. I was a typical kid that didn't grow up with instruments, but I had the Sony boombox. So I just started I found out that you could hook up more than just the two, the left and right. You could just hook up unlimited amounts of speakers, as long as, depending on how your own. But anyway, I won't even get into that. But then I just got really into pop music. Mariah Carey was a big deal for me, and then Selena's, and I don't know, all the stuff on the radio, and that fell into a little bit of credit card debt, and then I just went and got turntables, and I was just infatuated with electricity, and then I got something to play with electricity, which would be the decks, I guess. And then I kind of went all out on records and got addicted to buying them. But which is the reason why we have a Moog today. If I was still buying records as much as I did then, I just put all that money into the synthesizers now. But yeah, I just record collecting, and then that just, I don't know, just I happen.
Did you use like a Pioneer CDJ or use like vinyl turntables?
I got addicted to the vinyl records because once you find it at the store, you're never going to see it. So that's what kind of got me into like this massive debt. So I just got on the CDJs. I've only played the CDJs at clubs when they just didn't have the turntables, the Technics. But I just recently got it because the CDJs now output in 96 kilohertz, which is stepping stone, I think. I mean, it's a reason I would go get it.
Yeah, we played a gig like earlier this year, and we noticed that when we got done playing, the people after us, their output was a lot clearer and louder, compared to CDJs versus Technic turntables.
I mean, I got Orifon needles. It's the best you can get. I got like my Technics are completely modified, or I pimped my ride where I changed out the RCAs to Megami RCAs, and they have brand new grounding cables. It's the best stuff. But it's still, when you're transferring on a digital code onto Orifon needle, and that it's just, there's still a loss, even if I have the highest or whatever. But yeah, I think that even to, it depends on this, yeah, I don't know. I could have had Tractor on like a lower gain or something. I don't know. Who knows?
That's interesting because there's some people that really kind of say vinyl has like an ambience that's similar to like a Moog.
Yeah, it's warmer. It's for sure warmer.
Definitely has a warmth. Yeah.
But then with that, you're going to be a lower.
With,
some of the, it depends on what I'm spinning too. If, I barely bring my actual records around, I usually have digital coded, and I use scratch records that are the real vinyl, just because I can't.
Real vinyl for scratch.
Yeah, I have like one scratch record that I just bring everywhere with me in general. But yeah, I'm only doing middle frequencies when it comes to that record. So really it's just the convenience. I could just play my old records if it happens to be that kind of an event, especially for deep house. There's a lot. I used to collect so much deep house before it got so big recently.
That's cool. Yeah, well, I think it's interesting because, they kind of have a mixture of having like a real instruments with, DJ type of techniques. It's kind of a, where things are going. I see a lot of acts now that are bringing in like modular synths. Like I'm a big Euro guy. So the modular synths are there's a lot of DJs in Europe, like in Berlin and, Netherlands and London, that have these shows that are like modular synths with DJs and rappers and hip hop people, and they even sometimes will have saxophonists and live drummers, and it's kind of like I'm mixing what Sunrod did, like back in the 50s, was this kind of, they used to do spoken word, kind of statements on top of their jazz.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like what is going on today is kind of like there are rappers that are doing like spoken word with jazz drummers and saxophonists and then a modular synthesis. So I think what you guys are doing is kind of where things are going.
Yeah, we noticed that NAMM actually just came out with a new Pioneer came out with a new mixer that is
more channels. I mean, like a million more. It was for the purpose that a lot of DJs are now bringing over their guitars and, you know, other analog instruments.
And I do believe that the sounds kind of complete each other, you know, because when, you know, for a long time when I'd play drums with her, you know, the drums would cut right through the sound. And I, you know, set up my drum kit to work with a DJ that I use birch shells, which has a punch to it that would cut through the mix, you know, versus, you know, a lot of, you know, jazz and rock and everything, they'll use maple because it's just so warm and it's just, you know, it's really smooth. But I, you know, so I went all out and I got the birch shells and that punched right through them. And then the cymbals just cut right through, you know, and it was like, you know, they're kind of like peas and carrots, like they're 2 in 1, you know, when you have a DJ and then when you have, you know, live sound with it, you know, there's just, you know, now that
certain drums are just cut like timbales, which is the future thing I'm going to get. But that would, I can already sense what drums would sound really good with dance music.
And so that's where with this album, we're kind of taking the route of that. I'm going to play drums, guitar, and vocals. And Kristin's going to do, you know, like a sample pad of things that we recorded. And
we just got a drum trigger. So the little Traveler's kick drum she's got, which is used in typically jazz. It's a small kick. And she changed, what did you change the head to make it a little bit warmer and deeper?
Yeah, so when we were touring in Canada, I saw on the side of the road there was this 20-inch by 8-inch. It's a really odd, you know, drum size, and Pearl made this Rhythm Traveler kit, and it was just for convenience because it was so small. And so I changed out the rims from them being metal to wood and put maple wood rims on it.
And then we can add a drum trigger, so we can, every time she hits it, she can trigger a sub kick. I mean, we can even grab the sub kick from the Moog. Hey, you know,
that's cool. Yeah, you can do a lot of cool
so a lot of the
things
songs had 3 to 5 kicks in it just for layering purposes, you know, of that club sound to the rock sound. I mean, this is the first time we did like 2 snares, 3 snares on every single song just to fill space and the parts of the grid, beat grid.
That's interesting. Yeah, because I've been doing a lot of modular stuff. Actually, I have an 8-step Moog drum machine, but I can extend it with my grandmother. So you can do like 256 steps on a grandmother.
Oh, cool.
So you can extend what the DFAM does, and then you can actually create variability by creating, you know, all kinds of interesting multiple step drum triggers on the keyboard.
Right.
And then it goes into like the you know, controlled voltage triggering stuff out of the advanced clock on the DFAM comes into the gate in on the grandmother. And then what happens is you get a drum machine, but it's very organic because it's not exactly on time, which is what I like to do. I like to make sure it's like shows that it's not a machine as much. It seems more
a little nudge,
more human. Yeah. Which gives you kind of like a weird kind of variability where it's kind of a little off tempo on purpose.
I totally agree.
To kind of do, yeah, that's what I like to do. I mean, 808s and stuff are cool, and I have them, but sometimes it's like if you get too robotic, I like to get a little, you know, jazz going on with like a Sun Ra type.
That's
of thing.
One thing is Desereé refused to quantize any of the notation because. First of all, it might ruin the whole, because we did a lot of just straight live recording. We didn't do the MIDI out through the Moogs.
Cool. That's
so
cool.
It's just an audio track. Just because we were
awesome.
we were even having a little technical difficulty with that, but we were just like, you know what? No wasting time. We're just gonna go live record, and if this is the take, that's just how it's gonna be. There's no going back.
That's interesting because there's a new trend I've been watching. It was like DAW-less recording, and I've been doing DAW-less recording for the last 15 years. I use like Zoom R24s and Tascams.
Oh yeah, we love
and
Tascam.
I just record my. So I just do like a Zoom R24 and like a Tascam 24, and I just record all my analog stuff like live into my hardware recorders.
Fun.
Yeah, see what happened was when we bought the subsequent 37, it came with the software, and then, you know, we'd put a track down, say it was a bass line, and then, you know, we'd set it to it being a MIDI instrument. Well, then when we went to change the instrument, you were only able to use one at a time as an, you know, external instrument. And then, so we started to run into issues. And so we went to this,
laying down 20 million Moog tracks.
Yeah. So we went to the synthesizer convention and we talked to the Moog guys and said, hey, what's going on? You know, I don't think we're hooking it up right. I don't understand why we're not able to, you know, track multiple tracks with this. And they said, no, that's just how it is.
Yeah, it's not like a Roland. Like if you get a Roland, like a Juno, Junos can do like 256 voices, or like Phantoms can do two. Because I have a Juno and I can do 256 voices on MIDI, so I can have all this stuff going on my digital Juno. But the analog synths tend to not be able to do that.
Right.
They can't do that many voices.
No, so that's that's when we started. I thought, you know what, it's just going to be like when we track the drums and guitars, like we're just going to do a long take.
Yeah,
long take. But you know, at the same time,
yeah, you got to get like
album better doing one long take instead of cutting it. You know, instead of recording a small take and then cutting it, deciding to keep, and then recording more like the verse and the chorus all separately, which is what we used to do. This time, since we did one long take, because of the difficulty, it became better. The structure changed.
Well,
it was more
human.
Like we accidentally created tension and release really easily.
Well, that's cool because, you know, if you think about the old school recording, which I used to do with like a lot of my punk bands when I was my teenager, like we just record live, you know, and it's like, you know, like the Allman Brothers and the Who and Eric Clapton.
That's why rock's so good.
They used to they just take it, you know, do a live session and you just kind of have everybody there.
3-minute roller coaster.
There's nothing like doing. Yeah, I mean, it's like the thing is, like Pro Tools has made everybody create very antiseptic, perfect tracks.
Loopy, very loopy, robotic.
Yeah, they get too robotic in a way that even the new wave stuff, if you go back to like, you know, Joy Division and New Order, they weren't going as crazy with like digital audio workstations. They were still tracking, you know, stuff live. If you listen to new wave or new romantic songs, they have a little bit more life in them than some of the more modern electronics.
Because I do believe like you kind of put a part of your soul into it, you know, and if you go and you know, there's certain things that I want to be perfect. Like the kick drum like has to be on the grid. Like it just has to be perfect.
Except for that other kick in Dimes. That one was, that's a different story.
Yeah, I mean, unless it's like on purpose to make it almost sound like a, you know, a running horse or something. But you know, I'd found when it came to other things, even bass lines and stuff, where it was like, no, let's not make this perfect. Let's, you know, there still is that human part of it and human error. And I think that that's kind of something that makes it beautiful, you know, because anyone can take a MIDI instrument and quantize it and make sure it's perfect. And then before you know it, it sounds like a robot. It's just too perfect.
Yeah, that's the problem. I think a lot of people, if you go back and listen to the classic albums, you know, you listen to stuff like, you know, from like Yes and The Who and Pink Floyd, there's a lot of happy accents. So if you listen to like, you know, Layla, another love song, the jam band kind of Allman Brothers style, that can't be quantized. You know, they got two drummers going. You know, they've got like two good rhythm guitarists going, and there's things that are about that human capability or creativity that can't be kind of dictated into the grid. You know, there's some stuff that you just gotta let the musician kind of do what they do. And if you try to, like, I had one time I was working with somebody and they said, oh, well, the DAW is saying it's in the key change isn't right. And I said, well, that key change is because I want to do it a little non-standard. And so, like, if you just follow your DAW and like get rid of all the happy accidents and make everything perfect BPM, then you lose some of the stuff that makes, you know, some of the classic songs that we used to listen that are like famous are because they're mistakes.
Oh, you're 100% right. Yeah, I saw it was Joe Rogan did a podcast with Steven Tyler, and Steven Tyler was talking about how, you know, everything's so perfect these days, and how there was a blues musician he really looked up to, and he said he was late on everything in his vocals, but it was like just perfect because it would come in on time, but it was just barely late. And there's just this human part of it that if they would have put it on grid and made it perfect, it would have taken away from it, you know?
Yeah. I mean, if you listen to Hendrix, you could say, you know, today people would think that's sloppy, but it's like, that's genius. You know, the kind of jazz aspects of what Hendrix was doing, what Dwayne Allman used to do, that you're gonna the old Peter Gabriel Genesis and the kind of Vic Wakeman, Keith Emerson. They did stuff that's I don't know. It's hard to being a musician. There's something about it where it's not just on the grid.
Mm-hmm.
It's about what you bring to like a painter. You're kind of bringing emotion.
Yeah.
And Hendrix used to do like maybe 30 different solos. And you never knew which one was the right one, and they had to figure out which one they were going to put down. And it's kind of like what the emotion was.
Definitely. I just saw a documentary the other night about Janis Joplin, and she was talking about how, music is created from emotion to create more emotion, and I do believe that if totally you make it too perfect, that you're taking away from the emotion of it. And even in that exact moment that you're recording and you're feeling it. And, when we would do, one long take in the Moog and we're messing with the filter, that was in the moment we felt that, and I didn't ever want to go back and change that, because that was just something in that moment that sounded perfect to us, which was very human.
Yeah, that's interesting. And one cool thing about like things like Moogs is they're so point in time. I mean, the Moog you have can save presets, but there are lots of Moogs that
right.
can't. And one of the cool things about it is like every time you go on stage, it's going to sound a little bit different. You can never get it exactly what it was. And some people can get mad at that, and then they'll get a Yamaha, or they'll get a Roland, or they'll get a Nord because they want to have that patch. But if you kind of let that go, that can kind of drive your creativity. The fact that it's always going to sound a little bit different, I think is a plus. But some people, they don't look at it that way. But
sometimes it's a financial reason why we can't even replay the Moog, what we did on the album live quite yet. I still need 2 more computers to run Ableton to run that's typical DJ processing with the Moog. We use Endless Smile on the Moog quite often, just because it's like a rising high pass. So those are perfect for breakdown. So we can't even really perform that live because it's only a software instrument, and there's a few other things to create that big room house sound of, forcing the Moog to be big room house. So we still would need a whole Ableton, designated computer, and then a second one to run in parallel when it shuts down during a live performance or something.
But I'm not for computers.
Yeah. You always have to have the computers. They always got to have a backup.
Yeah. So instead,
that's kind of why
we just bounced the few synthesizers, the few presets in Moog that aren't too heavily processed, and just bounced each individual hit onto a drum pads.
Yeah, and I'm not really cool. We played for the radio one time, like live on the radio, and Kristin got a blue screen on a Mac, and it was just weird, and it wasn't working. So it was the heat. We were in a bus all day. Yeah, so she had to go and just do vinyl, and it was fine. For the show, it was great. But from there, it was like, I don't trust computers. Especially if we're not in a climate controlled, which you never fully are.
Couldn't afford air conditioning.
So when we went to the synthesizer convention, we met this guy that creates like modular, he's got this whole really cool instrument that he just made out of like cans, and every little piece he was making. And we talked to him and said, we're really interested in trying to find a hardware version of Endless Smile that Data Life made. And we emailed Data Life and was like, hey, is there any info you could put out there?
This hardware?
And they ended up putting something like 2 days later on their Instagram that was a hint of how they created it. So, we sent the guy all the info, and he and the best he could, created this, the software plugin into a hardware pedal. It has like 99 presets in it. And so that's kind of exciting. We're still trying to figure out, how can we use this live? Should we hook it up with the Moog? And our release show is going to be in March. So we're still trying to figure out, like, how are we going to do this live, and how can we do this without computers?
Yeah. Cause I mean, one of the things I did, because I don't trust computers so much, is as a 1-person band, what I end up using is I use my Tascam and my R24. And if you ever go back to the mid 70s, when the Who used to play Barbara O'Reilly and Won't Get Fooled Again, they used to run the synth off of reel-to-reel tapes. They used to run it off of tape machines. That whole synthesizer beginning of Barbara O'Reilly was run off a tape machine.
Oh.
Every time they did a show. And the cool thing, if you think about it, like my Zoom R24, if I put down my tracks, for a song, it's dead reliable. It doesn't crash like a computer. So I have up to 24 tracks I can mute and unmute. And so I actually use my digital tape machine and then play with it. And so then I get the exact sound that I did for the track.
Oh, that's cool.
All the time. And that's a cool way of capturing an analog synth if you capture it on like a Tascam or Zoom or any kind of digital recorder, and then you save it on an SD card and you have that machine with you and you put it up, on your gig. I've done gigs in New York with my R24 and have some backing stuff I did on my Moog that was kind of point in time. And I can actually replicate it dead reliable and it never crashes.
That's awesome.
So it's a cool technique for analog synths to be able to capture, tracks. You can capture the exact track and then play with it. It's something I figured out a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I like that.
But it kind of goes back to what Pete Townsend and the Who used to do that. And even like bands like Pink Floyd used to do that with some of their elaborate things that when they didn't have sequences back then, that's what they used to do.
I was curious because I just watched the documentary like 2 days ago about The Wall. And they went, it was like, all right, here's the recording, here's the live setup, here's the movie. And I was looking more towards like, all right, how did they do the live? Or, because they were using, what was that synthesizer? It was like 3 letters, like V something. It's a really rare synthesizer of its time.
Oh, maybe the VC3?
Yeah.
The EMS VC3 is like a really awesome British synthesizer, like an equivalent of a Moog. But it was totally different than the other. It had like a battleship grid that had little pegs. And instead of using controlled voltage wires like you see on Euroracks, they're using wires. It used these little pegs, and the pegs were on this matrix, and it did the connections with these little pegs like battleship.
Oh, fun.
And it ended up, and the thing is, I guess the polarity on the pegs was not consistent, so the thing would act very different depending on what kind of pegs you used.
It's probably give it that phasey sound. If it's like
gave a really phasey sound. Yeah, it's like a Pink Floyd sound. If you listen to it, Pink Floyd used that synth on a lot of their stuff.
Phasers.
Yeah, it creates that kind of sound. It's very Pink Floyd.
Yeah, Dark Side of the Moon's a huge. It was just, even to this day. I mean, I remember the first time I'd heard it and was like, wow. It was the first time I'd really heard synthesizers and started to recognize it. And I loved the use of, their room, and distance. And that's something that with this album, Kristin, showed me a lot of like, work with your space. You don't want a wall of sound just hitting you. Think about the room. If you want something to come from like left and it feel like it's coming from behind you and you're only listening to speakers left and right, like how can you create that? And I think, when she started to point it out to me, it was just even more, it was like, oh man, that's, Alan Parsons, the engineer, with Pink Floyd during Dark Side of the Moon. I was like, man, they really got that well.
In a box, not a piece of paper.
Yeah. And I think, Alan Parsons actually, I think like last year got his first Grammy because he did like a whole Dolby, 3D kind of soundscape for one of his own albums, because when they did Dark Side of the Moon, it was on quadraphonic, it was set up to before, and they recorded it in that way to have 4 speakers. And then, what was intended for music ended up taking off, when Dolby took off with Star Wars, now it's just, you have the 11.1 systems in theaters and stuff.
Songs will soon be in 5.1 everywhere, coming soon.
We're wanting to get into like the 3D soundscape.
When music quality catches up with TV quality, it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting because like Pink Floyd, and the Who, the Who Quadrophenia was a quadraphonic sound album.
Oh,
it was designed to be, that's totally designed to be that way.
If you find one on eBay, I'm buying it.
I mean, a lot of them came out. I think like Simon and Garfunkel, theirs was quadraphonic, and like the Doors of the time.
Yeah, but the apparatus that came with the vinyl.
Oh yeah.
That thing.
Oh, that chick did?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's this have you ever seen what is it called, like Sound and Waves or something? It was the woman that did like the Bachelor.
Oh yeah.
And that's a really interesting documentary, and she came out with an album. I think she'd only made like 300 of them, and she had teamed up with an Australian company that they made a little receiver that just said plug in your vinyl and then plug in 4 speakers. And you know, it was just
these days it's not happening.
You know, I think it was like $300 for the vinyl, but I thought, oh man, this is great, because with this happening, it's kind of only right now happening in sound installations and art museums.
Yeah, I can't even get friends to listen to stereo sound.
Yeah, everyone's stuck on the mono speaker, Bluetooth, or just listening on their phone.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up, I kind of show my age. I grew up, with vinyl. I'm in my 50s, so I every time I bought a record, I had it in vinyl. I had Led Zeppelin records with the little cutouts and the spinning wheels, and it was cool the way they presented the work back then, because you got all this art and liner notes, and music was an experience. You go to a record store, you pick up the vinyl, you put it in your hand, and then you'd listen to the album in its entirety.
Mm-hmm.
Because
read everything.
That's kind of the way you're supposed to do it,
Yeah.
So I tend to be an album-oriented person. So let me talk about like your new album that's coming out in March. I've seen some previews of some of the songs on SoundCloud. You've got like Shady Beach and Hollow, and I listened to those, and it's really interesting. And so are these from that album?
Yeah. So, what's really cool is, going from like where you're meant to listen to the album as a whole, we very much took that idea. And so it's a concept album. And, I'm loving Dark Side of the Moon as much as I did. We set it up. I had watched a million interviews with Alan Parsons and all the guys, and David Gilmour and Roger Waters. And they all said it happened by accident, that it lined up with Wizard of Oz. And anyone can create a score. So I don't know if it really did happen by accident, but the sheer fact that it could have happened by accident. So we set up our album as a concept album, that the last song is called Time and the first song of the album is called Travel. And so the album's meant to be heard as a whole in a loop.
Cool.
And that's where we're pressing on vinyl, for the first time with it. And just to set it up, what if it could go with a movie? Like, we just set it up that it could go with picture.
But there's far out other reasons, like endless loop. It's like life itself is an endless loop. In our eyes, the world or the universe is just infinity. So you could it's kind of like a small branding thing where there's even duality to this, like the digital and analog duality. This whole concept album is about dark and happy. The album cover will have a disco ball, but it's holographic, and behind it is a dented cap, the dust cap of a speaker. So it's like damaged goods hiding behind a shiny disco ball. So there's so many concepts. Cool. I don't even know. I mean, even the endless loop thing, we're kind of into, how do you call it? Ancient knowledge. No.
Conspiracy theories and all that fun jazz. Yeah. Yeah.
That's cool that you guys are doing a concept record, because I mean that's where I've been into progressive rock, ever since I was a kid, and everything the Ghost does. I mean, we've done tons of projects that are concept albums. That's kind of where we live, and we're in like what Genesis did with like Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. Tommy, Quadrophenia, The Wall. That's kind of what we grew up listening to, stuff like that. And, even Meatloaf, Bat Out of Hell. We kind of grew up listening to albums that were meant to be heard as whole projects. So every time we do something, we tend to do it from like it's a novel, like it's a short story. And it's cool to see musicians still doing that, because some people are kind of in this age where it's just a Spotify playlist and it's all over the map.
Yeah.
It's cool to see you guys doing that.
And the album has a lot of songs that are very different from each other, but still somehow is 128 beats per minute and dark and sad at the same time. But, one would be deep house. This one would be, like Time Travel is really rock and jazzy. Nowhere near it's kind of close to deep house, but the we come from a lot of genres, the both of us. It's just too many. So I do like the album, you know, when people do make albums in general, just because it's a time period in your life. You happen to be listening to that style at that moment. Because I've had a Latin house phase. I had super soulful house, a giant phase of that. European style, trancey stuff. I mean, the list goes on. And, you know, right now, my current aura is more of a jazzy performance when it comes to cymbal. The rock is like, I like the snare sound and the hand claps from house music. So both of them are needed.
Mm-hmm.
There's two types of kicks, the rock kick and then the club kick. And it's just what I'm into right now. I'm sure 10 albums from now, it'll be no beats whatsoever. I'm sure it'll be experimental.
Yeah, I was watching a documentary with Peter Gabriel, and he was in this phase where like no cymbals, no hi-hats, just bass and drum.
Mm-hmm.
And if you listen to a lot of Peter Gabriel, he would dictate like, I don't want any hi-hats, I don't want any cymbals, I just want kick and you know.
I have a strong feeling I'm going to become this person that doesn't want anything on the 2 or the 4 or the 1. Okay, just the 3. Okay, I'm left with nothing.
Yeah, it's interesting because then he'd be in the studio and he'd tell the drummer like, nope,
Take
don't do that.
Yep.
And there's interesting, and even with progressive music, there's one story like on the album So, they had the drummer do like 90 takes, and then they took tape and then they spliced the 90 takes and rearranged the order of the drum part, and it was all done by splicing tape and taping it back together.
Oh, that's fun.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of like what progressive bands, you know, like the George Martin style of production that people used to do. You know, people do it on the grid, but it's cool when you actually do it on an analog tape. It has a different feel.
Mm-hmm.
But,
Definitely.
Yeah, it's interesting. You guys are kind of really like in the space I love when I talk. Because this whole project I've been doing since 2018 is, you know, I'm a musician and producer myself, but I like to talk to musicians. And what I found is that, you know, there were people on the net that were charging musicians to do interviews. And I said, you know, I just like to talk to musicians that I'm a musician.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to just do it for free and see what happens. And it's just really cool to be able to talk to indie music singer-songwriters and figure out where they're coming from and what they're doing. And, you know, I've talked to over like 40 artists in the last 2 years.
That's awesome.
All over the world. And I think it's an education. Like if you're a musician, you always want to be able to interact with other musicians, and it's really cool to be able to talk to creative people.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting you say that, is because, you know, we find that, you know, as being a couple of engineers, you know, we don't have a lot of people to talk to about it. I'm sure our friends are sick of hearing about music, and, you know,
or at least I'll talk about compressor. Hey, how's your compressor? Oh, okay, let me explain to you a compressor.
Yeah. You know, and to analyze music in that way and sound as a whole. I mean, even like Foley arts and, you know, different things that, you know, that people just don't realize. You know, I remember my mom like loved that movie Fried Green Tomatoes, and she goes, oh, I just want my fried green tomatoes to have that crunch, that when she takes a bite of it, it's that crunch. And later in life, I'm like, oh, that was Foley. You know, that wasn't like there when they, you know, were filming. Like that was
still trying to find those fried green tomatoes.
Get that crunch, you know. And it's just
I mean, it's interesting because I talk to people, you know, either doing like digital recording, and then people are saying, oh, they gotta have a Neve board or get Neve, Rupert Neve stuff.
Oh yeah, those mic
trees. Jeez.
Yeah, everything he did, like if you go to, you know, you ever seen a movie Sound City, it was, you know, there was this big Neve board, a soundboard that he created. Like the whole board was his technology. Mm-hmm. And I guess Fleetwood Mac Rumors was done on it. A bunch of really classic albums were done on it.
They were like Neve was so good that I'm traumatized, and I didn't do anything with recording after college until recently. I felt like the Neve quality was so good that you just can't do anything cheaper. So we just didn't really. That's why our album is out a million years later after we started performing. It's just after we were in an accident, we just figured, you know what, we're we're just going to have phase issues. We're going to not have a Neve mic pre. We're just going to record with what we have and then try to use a concept we now call hi-fi and a lo-fi budget. You know, it's just no Neve mic pre, but we combined 2 microphones that you normally wouldn't combine to do one vocal track. But of course, that's where phasing can happen, and I was taught never to do that. But in this point in time, I just don't care. But it sounded really great, and it's also a similar Pink Floyd phasing effect on accident.
Yeah, I mean, we used it
Well,
for
what's
benefit
really cool,
in that way. And then we were really into, we got a Tascam field recorder, and then we got really into going out and taking field recordings and adding elements of nature and, you know, that 3D soundscape, because, you know, like we like to go camping and hiking. And, you know, when you go out and you're just sitting by a bonfire and you hear, you know, all the crickets and the frogs and, you know, all the different sounds, it's like, man, they're all just performing as one. It's just this big symphony just all around you. All you have to do is just listen. And from that was like, you know, when Kristin was describing, you know, the space, when we create an audio space, you know, and in trying to get sounds to come from behind you, I quickly associated with the sounds trying to mimic nature, you know, and how you would hear something just by being out in the woods, sitting next to a fire and just listening.
That's interesting because like there's a famous Yes album. I don't know if it was like Fragile or Closer to the Edge. I think it's Closer to the Edge. It starts with a nature recording in the woods. They actually took a field recorder and recorded the woods.
Oh, cool.
And the beginning of that progressive album starts with the sounds of that woods, you know, being EQ'd on a nice soundboard. But it actually, you know, that's how it starts. And a lot of progressive bands used to do stuff like that.
Well,
you know, Pink Floyd used to do all kinds of, like, you know, recordings of people just saying statements.
Oh, yeah.
And then like outside noises and all kinds of interesting things that if Roger Waters and Gilmore would figure stuff out.
Yeah, and then the Animals album.
Nature never gets old. We started the album with cicadas.
Crickets.
Hear me out.
Hear me out. It started. Oh, yeah, but the whole album starts with the sound of cicadas. It was fall time and we were mixing the last track, and then the window was open and we heard the cicadas and it was like, wait a minute, that's on time.
And the field recordings fill a lot of space in a song. So you can do a small amount of tracks all of a sudden because the air from your field recording took up so much of the spectrum. I mean, we didn't even have enough RAM or the SSD type of drive for a computer to run the program well enough to have more than 50 tracks. So we were limited there too. I mean, the cicadas and the crickets and all the nature recorded from the Tascam just took up the size of what would have been 10 tracks.
It was nice because we would go, like we went to St. Louis and we went into a parking garage and like grabbed some field recordings, and, you know, we have a bonfire in our backyard and we ground. And so we just started grabbing actual sounds and chopping them up and using them as drum samples.
Yeah, there's one company, Splice, that everyone seems to be grabbing their sounds from. And I feel like now everybody sounds the same.
Well, that's one of the dangers that I see, like with things like that, is everybody grabs these
same libraries
samples and the same libraries all the time. That's kind of why I use modular analog synths, because I create my own tones. I create my own timbres, you know. And I even when I sample my own material.
Mm-hmm. That's what we did on a song, the same thing where we sampled our own material, that we bounced the song through it in reverse. And then for the breakdown, it was the actual song just thrown in reverse, and it almost gave it like a Disney sound. It was odd, you know, because we'd use tuning forks, you know, at different points that we'd actually threw in reverse. So then when we bounced the track and then threw that part in reverse, all of a sudden now the tuning forks are going in, you know, forward time. Everything else is in reverse, and then, you know, it was just really far out, and we ended up really liking it. And it was, you know, with lower budgets come higher creativity. You know, it's like, well, how can we do more with less? And I think it was like reggae or something started in Jamaica because they had, you know, poor like JBL speakers.
Blown
speakers,
you know, jazz bass sound.
You know?
That's right. Jamaica.
That's like the Kinks. The Kinks used on that famous, like, you know, You Really Got Me. It was a broken speaker. It was a speaker that the lead singer of the Kinks, his brother's the guitar player, and he like broke a speaker, and then he broke his amp. and then he got that sound that you got me, really got me now. He got it because it was a broken amp.
It's so interesting how things come from mistakes, because I think I remember reading about like the 808, and it was like there was these transformers that they're getting, and they're like what's the word, like mistake transformers, or
Got the wrong ones. Who
Yeah,
knows?
glitchy.
Yeah.
There's a glitch in it. There's a glitch in it that makes the sound why people like it.
Yeah. there was something
Yeah.
with it, and it was a mistake gone good, and I believe in
It's
that.
like it's kind of like the mini Moog. The mini Moog is famous that it kind of over boosts the signal, and it wasn't supposed to be like that on the actual ladder filter. It wasn't supposed to do what it does. It was actually an error. But all the musicians found it, and they were like, Moog was going to correct it, and the musicians said, "Oh no, we like it."
Yeah.
Like Emerson said he liked it. All these other musicians said they liked it. Bernie Worrell said he liked it. Wakeman said they liked it. Like, no, don't get rid of that.
Yeah. It's like these beautiful mistakes.
Ooh, that's a good.
That's what's really cool, because I mean, I use a sampler called a Morphogene from Make Noise. It's a Eurorack sampler, and one of the cool things it does is like it does a time warp, where
cool.
basically it can take like two parts of the song from just two different points in time and it merge them.
Oh, cool.
Fun.
So it can take something from like the beginning of the reel, the middle of the reel, and then kind of make them all happen simultaneously. So it's like having a multi-track sample within one reel, and you can do all kinds of really interesting things. And then because it's a Eurorack sampler, you can kind of override the workflow of the sampler and then send it all kinds of triggers from other things. That you could send like an 808 into it, and then you could run a filter into it. You could run an envelope into it. You can do all these crazy things, and then it gets very George Martin like. You're doing like backward tape type stuff, but even different than that because you're kind of merging things. Mm-hmm. And so you can create very unique soundscapes or sound paintings, which are like Hendrix described Electric Ladyland. Somebody asked him, like, what are you doing here? And he said, well, it's a sound painting. And if you listen to Electric Lady, it's kind of like that, because he's making the guitar sound like birds, and water and all kinds of cosmic stuff. And people have asked him what was he doing? It's like, I'm a sound painter. It's a sound painting.
Very cool.
And I thought that was kind of interesting. I kind of use that a lot in what I do, because I think if you get into real progressive music and you're doing experimental stuff, you kind of think of it, you are a sound painter, and that's how you layer your different tools as a musician. You can kind of build your canvas, your sonic canvas,
Definitely,
with all the different things.
Yeah, true.
So it sounds like you guys are totally there. You're doing that awesome creative process. You're creatives, and you're really stepping out.
Yeah,
what's the name of the new album going to be? Do you have?
It's actually called The Moment. It's kind of a tribute to our bus. It's, when we bought that shuttle bus, it had on the side of it said Precious Moments Childcare. And we just left it on because we felt like, well, maybe people would drive safer around us if they think there's kids on board, and, we won't get pulled over as much. And that ended up not being true. We got like rear-ended by
but the witness pulled over because she thought there was a buttload of kids in there.
Yeah, like we ended up getting rear-ended by a semi bus like 2 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So it was kind of in that exact moment that everything in our lives changed. That Kristin was in the hospital for a month with 15 broken bones, and we really started to evaluate. It was like this taste of death of where we're at. We're musicians that have one song.
We were performers, not artists.
And from there, we're like, we need to work on our artistry, and we went full time with it, and are taking a huge gamble with money that we don't have, using credit cards and things. And it's scary. It's like, oh my gosh, like everything could just collapse on us. But it was just this moment of like, I don't care, because when I'm on my deathbed, I'm not going to regret making this album and doing the things that I really care about. And so then I started having these dreams, in the midst of creating, that was like this godlike person telling me to do things in my dreams. And
sound engineering god.
Yeah, it was odd.
Like yeah, you got to get that parametric EQ.
Yeah, like there was like, I had this dream that said, take the vocals, do 3 tracks, and do one far left, turn it down, do one far right, turn it down, have your center and front, and fill it up that way. I had another dream that was like, there was this EQ that every time I'd click on it, it would, I would able to manipulate. I wasn't just stuck with 6 bands. It was just like a multi-band EQ. I could do whatever. And then I ended up finding out it exists, and it's called FabFilters EQ. And it was the best investment.
Like the way it looked.
The way it looked.
Like it had the yellow color.
Yeah, I mean, it was like, oh my gosh, I had a dream about this, and this thing does exist. I had a dream like later.
All we had was factory plugins.
Yeah, so it was like these things, like things were like kind of speaking to us, and we're learning about things when we needed to learn about it. We, when we started doing more, research on like synthesizers, and went into that rabbit hole, and everything just evolved to be where we're meant to be right now. And so that's where the album being called The Moment, it was just all these series of moments have like now come together, and kind of the seize the day type thing of like, we're taking a huge gamble, we're now looking for PR.
The album was on credit.
Yeah. And it worked out because like when it happened, the wreck happened, our friends started to GoFundMe and asked for $10,000, and all of our friends got together and ended up pulling over $12,000. And so we just like put it into getting a Moog synthesizer and $2,000 worth of software instruments. And, my guitar, we had a computer and monitors and, a guitar and a bunch of stuff that got broken in the wreck, and so we were able to replace it. And,
that's awesome.
So it was kind of this like serendipitous type thing that,
I mean, maybe it was good that I was supposed to be traumatized from college and thinking you cannot record unless you have a Neve. And now I'm just after the accident, I'm like, screw it. We're just going to have to record right now with whatever we have. Maybe we'll just go ahead and finally drop more money to get a Moog and, a Fab filter and everything that we didn't have that, did really help the quality of the album, but not necessarily, does not have to be an LA2A compressor, a Neve mic pre, and a Neumann microphone.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, the whole like punk aesthetic, if you're bands like the Ramones and Husker Du, Replacements, it wasn't about having like the perfect sound. It's kind of like the attitude or the passion behind it.
Like DJ World, man, they're over there bumping 96 kilohertz. No.
Yeah, and, another thing I ran into not too long ago, was the movie Clerks, and I started to, I have a big VHS collection, and I was watching it, and I started to, look more into what Kevin Smith and how he made the movie, and he was working at the store at the time, and I guess he got in a car accident, he got some insurance money from that, and then he maxed out like 4 credit cards or something, and he literally like was working during the day and shooting at night, and was even sleeping some
free set location.
Yeah, and I think they had like 20 some odd days or whatever to shoot the entire film, and it's this thing that he took that gamble too, that was like, we're putting everything on the line with money we don't have, just with the fingers crossed that we could
die being musicians without music.
Yeah, could create a career in it, a modest career. And that's what like kind of keeps me going, was like, we were able to book our tours and we were able to do all this while working, and it was just, we were spread too thin. And, at this very moment, we're like, no, we're going to concentrate on recording first, but it all works out because, everything revolved around music. Like I was a bartender for a long time, and Kristin got into real estate.
But we also had to build a house,
so we
built a studio, and then get some income from
that. We bought a multi-unit, and we rent upstairs, rent downstairs, so it covers a majority of our mortgage. We pretty much pay utilities, so our life got cheaper. And then we're like, all right, wining and dining, we can't do it. We don't have the money to do it. We need to buy, this Moog, and these things.
Buy CJs real quick.
And so we just like, it's kind of this suspense that we joke around about every day, is like, what is going to happen? Like we're just really putting ourselves in this really shaky moment. And I was talking to one of my best friends about Anvil, the story of Anvil, this documentary, and where they're at, and really showing like, the hard points of like, how are we going to get this recording done? We just made 13 albums, and and it was like one of these things that it's really beautiful, because they're really they showed how hard it is, that it's not just being a musician and recording and, whatever. It's like, we had to build a house. I had to learn web design and graphic design and video and stop motion and, all these things that don't pay.
We built the house, so we had to learn how to do that.
Yeah. you know,
just to make it cheaper.
So it's like kind of this suspenseful moment that we're at, that, you know, we have, you know, 20 grand in the bank and we have 20 grand on credit card debt right now, and we're at exact zero. And you know, it's,
well, I think if you talk to a lot of musicians, I mean, people who are musicians, they usually they put themselves in situations because they love the music.
yeah,
yep.
You know,
You got to make the gamble.
And,
I was raised Filipino, and it was really difficult for me. Oh my gosh. I mean, my parents, if they knew what was really happening, I would just, I don't know.
it's better for them not to know.
Yeah.
You know, but it is this like really
Well,
suspenseful kind of
yeah.
story of where we're at, and I think it'll just add to the end, you know.
Well, if you know the story of tons of bands, I don't know if you ever heard of the band Death. There was like a black punk rock band, and they never got big until they did this, like a documentary was done about it. And then there was like three brothers in the band, and one of them died after, you know, before they ever really got famous. They got famous because a movie was done about it.
Right.
Like 20 years after the fact, and then people went and got into their music. And sometimes you get stories like, I mean, the Velvet Underground weren't big in their time, but everybody knows Lou Reed and the Velvets now is like super inspirational. Or a band like Alex Chilton's Big Star was never big during its prime, but then a lot of people name check them, like the Pumpkins and Wilco, and you know, all kinds of famous like 90s, early 80s bands name check Big Star as like being one of their big influences. Like REM name checked them. But it's, you know, you never know. As a musician, you do what you do because you're passionate about it.
Mm-hmm.
And usually what happens when you're passionate about something, then people come to you. I mean, REM were this, you know, college radio small band, and they did things the way they wanted, and the world came to them.
Yeah.
They kind of defined like the indie rock.
Like I read this thing that Bjork said, saying, if you try to please everyone, you're going to please no one. If you aim at trying to please no one, you may just accidentally please everyone. And it really kind of stuck with me in that way, you know, that I think like some years ago we saw like the Lumineers or something got a Grammy, and they just said, we just never gave up.
We just kept touring. We were just the band and the bus.
And it really kind of spoke to us in that way, that was like, you know, well, there is no point in ever giving up. If this is something that makes you happy, just keep doing it. And everyone's going to tell you that they don't understand why you're doing it and that you shouldn't be doing it. But that's even more the reason to do it, because maybe people don't understand. But it's like, this is how we're getting our emotion out. And, you know, our band name being Dance Loud, I had a dream about it last night that someone was like, well, your band name doesn't really match the music. It's really dark and emotional. It's not really Dance Loud. And I was like, well, that's what it used to be. And then this accident happened.
So you must have listened to side B.
Yeah, you know, that it was like, you know, now our souls went into it, and our feelings at the time, you know, and the depression of, you know, after, you know, we like built this tour bus, we built this house, all this stuff, and then it just felt like everything just fell on us. And it was like, you know what, like, this is what makes me happy. This is where I'm getting my emotions out. And I think the best thing for us would be for someone to hear it and be like, you know, I feel that, and I've been there, you know, and I know what it feels like to struggle, because being humans are hard. I don't know what planet we came from, but coming to this planet has been difficult.
Even so, the bus represented an escape. It wasn't all about, that was the other thing. It's like there's still life, that the everyday's life struggle everyone seems to have. Like the tour bus was that van life hashtag where you just want to escape from the world, and it was our way to escape from our jobs, you know, that were making us unhappy. It's just at the moment.
Well, sometimes something big.
It's her tribute. It's her like obituary. The bus itself.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's interesting because I mean, I'm a cancer survivor. I'm in my 50s. I got cancer when I was in my late 20s.
Whoa.
And I was always into music, and I just never gave up. And I've been doing music since I was 17. I'm in my 50s. You know, I finally got a contract when I was age 51. I got a distribution and recording contract with a New York record label, but like I never gave up, because I just, you know, and I got this podcast. I've been interviewing bands, and I've been able to do my music kind of on my own terms, the way I want to do it. Mm-hmm. And it's just what you do. You do music because you believe in it, and you never give up. because it's like if you're trying to be like the biggest pop star in the world, maybe you're never going to get that. But if you just want to do music because you believe in it, you'll find a different path. You know, you find different things. I found this podcast just because I kept on doing music and never stopped. You know, so I always just encourage people to do what you believe in, and you know, the market will come to you.
Definitely. I believe that.
Oh, I mean, it's not even about making it's just the journey itself, which is what the bus taught us. It's like it wasn't even about we were just having a blast, just living that life, just constantly putting music in our life, and you just continue to do that. And really, to us, it's just a bonus if something like a Grammy were to happen or whatnot, because just the album is like a baby. It's like we don't have any kids, but it's like the same. It feels very similar. You made it, you raised it, it came from where you came from, and then there it is. And it's not even about where it goes.
You know, yeah.
You know?
Well, you know, when it comes out, what we like to do with people on our podcast, we've had multiple interviews with some of our guests in the last 2 years, where when they have an album release, we do an episode where we actually talk about the album track by track. So I would invite you to come on when your the movement is ready to come out. We could do a album release episode.
Perfect. Oh, definitely. Yeah. Cause I mean, every single song is, you know, I feel that art is the reflection of reality, you know, and it's a lot about, you know, the reflections of right now, you know, and the state of just the world, you know, and the biggest thing is there is that duality of, you know, trying to spread positivity, but at the same time pointing out, you know, little things like the song, like Hollow is like saying like, are you hollow inside? And the whole thing about the song is it's showing that humans are 50% good and 50% bad. You know, every single one of us, you know, there's something, everyone does something to justify what they do, you know, and so that's where it's like, it's nice because, you know, there's a song called Dimes that, you know, is pretty much talking about, you know, getting paid a dime and, you know, doing all the work, and my boss is getting paid $1 and feeling overworked and underpaid and underappreciated. And I thought, you know, we are blue collar people, and that's who we're speaking to, is, you know, people that feel that way. And I think that's something very valid because, you know, we're people, you know, we just work our whole lives away to save up till when we're like 70, and then we're too tired to experience it. You know, it's just kind of this, if whatever you care about, just do it now, because like, you never know when you're just going to get hit by a bus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you better be on a good ride.
Yeah. And I think
that's kind of
the thing is like, it's totally true. Enjoying that journey is because
we should have bought AC from the beginning.
You know, when I talked to, you know, this musician not too long ago, and he's like, I just want to make it. And I go, well, what does it look like? And he was like, I just want to make it. And I was like, okay, well, if you say that you want to go to the moon, you're trying to build a ladder to get there. You know, like, what does the moon look like when you get there? You know, like,
what does it feel like? Does it feel good?
Yeah. I was like, what kind of house do you live in when you have made it? And he goes, well, I like my house. And I go, oh, well, then you've already hit a ladder on your way to the moon. That's one step that, you know, you've hit success in that way. So what does it feel like when you're there, and what does it look like? You know, and I've realized
there's a lot of famous people that don't feel they made it.
Yeah. Like they're reaching for the moon, but they don't know what the moon looks like when they get there.
And then they become just sad the entire time.
You know, it's us artists, you know, we all kind of suffer from depression and stress and low self-esteem and low confidence and these things, but the whole thing is just enjoying it, you know, and that's something I've been trying to, you know, embed into myself. And I send myself 3 times a day these gratitude things at 2, 6, and 10. That's like, hey, what are you grateful for? Like, think about this, you know, to try to, you know, reprogram my mind to like not take things too seriously, because this life is just a game. You know, it's like a movie. It's got suspense and thriller and trauma and action and love and, you know, drama and comedy, and we're just, you know, all of us just have our own movie, you know. So that's where I started to like think very clearly about like, well, what are my goals? And, you know, and I think that, you know, one big goal for me was just to be working on music every day. Well, that's one of my goals, and I'm there, and I feel grateful for it, you know, and I find that to be successful.
Because in the end, we're probably just light beings that are just transferring energy when we die. So really, this life is just a millisecond of our entirety.
Yeah.
Yeah, no big deal.
We're kind of far out.
Well, it's good to
Energy's
have.
transferred and never dies.
Yeah, I decided, like what you said, like you can't wait till you're 70 to do what you want. When I had cancer when I was 28, I decided, you know what? Everybody else that was playing band, that was doing bands in the basement with me, they got married and they stopped.
Yep.
Right. I never stopped because after I had cancer, so I don't care if I'm going to be the next Tom Petty or whatever, or Bernie Worrell.
Yeah.
I'm just going to do this because I love it.
Yeah,
and
you're right.
I survived cancer, and I'm just going to do it.
Yeah, why do people stop? I don't understand the purpose of it. What was the point of even starting?
Yeah, I was like, all my friends that were musicians all stopped, and they said, well, it's kind of like that was a phase. And I was like, I never stopped. I kept on going,
It's
and
an
I still
addiction.
create to this day. Yeah, I have a home studio, and I just write every day. I mean, I kind of do what you say. I'm making it because every day I can go into my home studio, I can write whatever I want.
Yeah.
And nobody can stop me from doing that because I own it. So that's why I'm able to produce the music I do. I pretty much produce music like every day.
And I do have this, like, I wonder. I talked to this bass player like this past summer, and he was talking about how he got tinnitus, and I thought, oh my gosh, that's like one of my worst fears. And I was like, I've heard of people like using meditation and noise cancellation and different things to help with tinnitus, and and I kept trying to inspire him, like, no, just don't give up, and finally he had said, he goes, it's just that I wasn't good enough and it didn't happen. So I just gave up because, like, I'd rather give up and know that maybe I could have than have tried and didn't. And I thought, oh man, that is not the way it's not the way to look at it. Like, you don't need money, power, and fame to enjoy what you're doing. Just do what you do.
Yeah, I mean, I just enjoyed playing, and the thing is, I because I keep on playing, I got this podcast. I got this podcast is Anchor is part of Spotify, and they found me on my SoundCloud. I had a bunch of, I had a certain amount of listens on SoundCloud, so they could approach me and say, hey, would you be interested in interviewing musicians and stuff. And so I said, yeah, I'd be into that because I'm an indie guy, and I like other indie musicians. So I found it as a platform, and it helps, with my own music. It helps people, find out about me, and then I find out about them. And it's, I spend time doing this, so I can't do my music all day because I have to do this too. But this is enjoyable, and it's part of the whole process. You kind of like, okay, well, this is where my fame is going. People are knowing me maybe more for my podcast than my own music, but I still get to do my music. So you kind of find your niche, and you keep on working. And I never stopped doing my own music. So it's just interesting. You just find out where you're going to go, and you never know where your music brings you. You could end up getting some kind of sync licensing deal, with your music. You could end up working with filmmakers. You could work with a video game company. I'm an electronic musician, so there's all kinds of stuff you can do.
Yep, dial in what you want.
Yeah, that's actually a big goal of mine. Is for
sync licensing is like the biggest way to get out there. Influence marketing. I do some influence marketing stuff because of the stuff I do, and it's not like my number one goal is to be an influence marketer, but you do what you can, so I can buy the next Moog.
Totally.
So I can keep on creating something new. And, if I'm able to get the next Moog or my next modular and keep on refining my sound, that's my goal.
How do we buy shares on that? Oh, employees bought it all, I bet. Oh.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I probably got to kind of close it off now, but this is going to get published tonight on 11 different platforms, including Spotify and Apple, Radio Public, and Overcast. And I'll send you the big links. They're out there. We have an integration with Instagram. So the Spotify version of this podcast can get launched from a highlight on your Instagram.
Oh, perfect. Awesome.
So I will put them on my Instagrams, which I have a Josephine Electric, who's my alter ego.
Okay.
And then my Expansive Sound and a couple other ones, and my Facebook and my Blogger. So I will push this on all those platforms, and I hope to talk to you guys in March when your album comes out.
Oh, definitely. It was great talking to you.
Episode.
Yes.
Sounds like we're all.
Thank you, and wish you. Yeah, I wish you great success, and if I get out there touring, in the next year or two, maybe we'll run into each other.
Oh yeah, hey,
Oh,
we
if
could
you're
come to
here,
Chicago.
let us know, and we can
We'll set
help you
something up.
set up a tour if you need.
Yeah, well, I'm always looking to get out there. Usually I end up in New York because that's closer to me because I'm in the Northeast. But you know, Boston and New York tend to be where I hang out.
They're
But,
building like 20
yeah.
million more music venues. So they're trying to make Chicago a little bit more of what it hasn't been, what it used to be.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah, it'd be cool because I mean that's got a big history in blues.
Mhm.
But
Blues,
yeah,
jazz,
it'd be cool to
house,
see.
right? Gospel. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
not jazz. Blues, gospel, house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay. Well, I'll talk to you guys for sure. We'll be talking in March. Just let me know when you're ready to do another show. We'll do it.
Sounds awesome. All right, good talking to you. Have a good
great
weekend.
night. Thank you.